Hey y'all, welcome back. So we're talking about the receiving position of the snatch. We have the setup position. We've got videos on all of these things. We have first pull, which sets up our second pull, which is the jump so we can get maximal velocity on the bar. Then we have the third pull, which is the pull under with the elbows high, and the press under to go into the receiving position. So the receiving position is what we're talking about here. It's real straightforward. It is an overhead squat position. And it doesn't have to be the very rock bottom of an overhead squat. If the weight you're lifting is the maximal weight your body could possibly lift, it's probably going to be rock bottom or pretty close to it. But most of the time in snatches, especially if we're not at the world-class level, it's going to be a frame somewhere along that overhead squat. If it's really light, it might be right here. If it's heavier, I might have to go here, heavier, heavier, heavier. I go get that bar at its highest point. So what we're doing is if we take something and throw it up in the air, it goes slower and slower until it goes zero, and then it goes faster and faster the other way. We're trying to find it at zero wherever that is. If it's lighter, it's going to be up here. If it's heavier, it's going to be down here. If we're starting from the hang or high hang, so we're taking away our advantages, it's going to make it lower. Wherever it goes, as the bar's moving, we're pulling on it, pressing on it, trying to go find it. So when we catch it, what does it look like? It's pretty simple. Feet are in a squat stance. Our body is doing what we would in a squat. So wherever I am, weight stays even on the feet. And then what are we doing with the arms? In a push-up, our shoulders are back, we're twisting in. So that's what we're gonna do. That's gonna be the exact same position. Shoulders down in their socket, twisting in. And what I like to do is I push up and I try and over press. So I think a common mistake in the receiving position is people are trying to match the bar weight with how hard they're pressing. And especially in the snatch where we're not positive, it's gonna come down perfectly centered on you. You gotta over press. So no matter what the weight is, press up as hard as you can. So something you'll hear a lot is armpits forward. I like to think twisting my pinkies into the bar because that's what I do in a pull-up, in a toe-to bar, in a muscle-up. It's what I do on absolutely everything. So the main thing about the receiving position is remember from the setup, from the first pull and the second pull and the pull under, all of that is with an internally rotated shoulder because I've got an internally rotated shoulder when I'm in my jumping position, but also that allows me to keep the bar close as I'm pulling under. And then in the receiving position, I'm externally rotating to punch through, so we're gonna end up with that externally rotated shoulder. Whenever we get internally rotated, we see the bar typically roll forward. Something you might see, especially if you start digging online and getting into the weeds on this stuff, is there's entire camps of Olympic weightlifters that teach and use the internally rotated shoved up shoulder position. They love to argue over what's better. You see at the elite level, you see many different ways to create a stable shoulder. So we have to keep our context in mind. We know on the elite level, there's a lot of different shoulder positions that work. But what we do here at MovementLink is everything links back to a squat, a push-up, and a jump. That way, when we're working on snatches in our receiving position, we want to make sure that it can scale up to world class, but we also want to make sure that it scales sideways to these other things, and it scales out into the real world, and it transfers and does all of these things. So that's why it's super important to us that we get that externally rotated shoulder up here because that's going to be the same movement pattern we use for pull-ups, for toes to bar, for push-ups. It's going to be the same thing we do for blocking in football, or for pushing a car, or whatever we're doing. So the receiving position is just an overhead squat position, and it is as low as it needs to be for you to go get that bar at its highest point. So it's all about speed and being aggressive in that third pull, going to get the bar and being ready for it. Over press. That way, if it's off by just a little bit, you've got the protection there and you've got the position to finish the lift off strong. Hope that helps. Talk to y'all soon.